All right. Hey, everybody. I'm really happy to have you here today. We're going to be talking about technical storytelling in your SBIR proposals. Um, I'm actually really excited. I think this is going to be a fun day, fun class. Welcome, everybody. Hey, Dylan, it's good to have you here too. Dylan is our kind of counterpart in Utah. So if you know anybody in Utah, make sure that they connect with Dylan. And with me today again, Del Mackey. We're going to talk with you for the next hour and a half about really ways that you can really strengthen and make your proposal stronger. And Del, I'll go ahead and drive these first few slides, and then we'll transfer over so that you can kind of drive. That works for you.
Okay, that should work in.
Perfect, perfect. Again, we're really kind of focused on really telling a compelling story, right? We've talked about the three C's, right? Compliant, uh, complete, and compelling, right? Did I get those right? Today, we're really going to talk about that kind of storytelling elements. And then, really formatting too, imagery, white space in a very dense proposal. How can you make it so that this is an attractive piece of material that the reviewers will be reading as well? Uh, Again, last week, and we'll probably talk about some of the things that we talked about last week. We really talked about creating that statement of work, the design, things that you need to do to understand about your statement of work. Um, it is really part of your technical narrative, right? So now you maybe have an outline of your objectives. How do you bring that into a really clear narrative that the reviewers can read through? That technical narrative, that statement of work is really the majority of the technical volume that you submit, probably a good half of the page count that you have, depending on if it's 10 pages or 15 pages or more. Those need to be, we talked about this last week. No, and I'm gonna reference without no one here has done this. We've had clients that have used words like explore or something like that in their proposals. We're not exploring. You are going to tell them exactly the types of things that you are going to be researching, studying. You're going to tell them exactly the types of metrics or deliverables that you expect. So your work plan is very specific, right? So those are the things that we talked about last week. Kind of dialing in what you're going to deliver, how you're going to deliver it, who, what, where, when, kind of addressing all those 5 W's and 1 H, right? How you're going to be doing things. Your work plan really does tell the story of how this work that you're doing in phase 1 sets you up for success in phase 2, but also sets you up for success to eventually transition that technology into a program of record for the Defense Department or some other mission directorate within NASA, for example. So we're going to really delve into that a little bit more today as well. So why should your proposal tell a good story? I already kind of teased about, hey, and we're talking, we got like 8 weeks maximum to kind of get this proposal together. You want me to be creative? Yeah, I do. It really is going to make your reviewer's job easier. We've talked about layout and headings and things like that, making sure that you know the evaluation criteria. But you want your reviewers to read that proposal and want to keep reading it and be excited about what you're proposing at the end. And yes, you can do that. You want them to come away from that saying, damn, this is the project we want to fund, not just, yeah, let's test it. We're like, gosh, I can see a vision of this working. So those are the types of things that storytelling will bring when you are weaving that into your proposals. Kind of makes I use the phrase page turner, right? You want to kind of guide them, bring them along a journey in your proposal so they want to keep reading. And then it really does give them confidence that your company and project are absolutely the team and proposal to fund. So I send a couple of things I found a way into the video. Thanks. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just looking at chat here. I sent you guys, I think in the last, some elements that are in or references in last week's documents. I have a couple of additional references, books or articles that you guys can take a look at. This one happens to be a video by Lauren Faber. She's with Microsoft BI's team, and she has a great video. It's not that long on really the art of storytelling in tech. This slide and the next slide are just a handful of ways, and Dell could probably come up with some additional 5 types of points that hit on the same thing. What do you want to make a really good, compelling story? And when you're talking about technical sales, when you're talking about technical proposals that you are trying to persuade and get people to believe in you, telling a story is going to be really helpful. Lauren, so I really encourage you guys to hit this one up and take a look at it. Every great story follows the same flow. Dale's going to talk later about the hero's journey, right? You're going to have a setting. You're going to have a relatable protagonist, your character, your main character. There's going to be some kind of conflict, something that's not being done well right now, or some terrible thing that needs to be resolved. You're going to have a solution, a path to success, and then you're going to have some type of resolution and conclusion to that. Kind of similarly, kind of related to this is the way that you can kind of start understanding and how to craft that type of outline, that kind of storyline, is to really understand your audience, understand your goal for communicating with them, understanding what your audience knows. Who, what do they care about? Why will your audience be interested in what you're about to tell them? And then how will your communication kind of create change or create action within your audience, motivate them to do something? Let's focus on a couple of those things in a minute. So how do we create a story? Yes, it's summertime, so I wanted to play with Jaws, right? I think Jaws is a great story, right? We, the book that I reference here in chapter 3 is really about technical sales. It's unleashing the power of storytelling, winning hearts, changing minds. It may seem blah, blah, but it really is what all of you guys are going to be doing. You're eventually going to have a product. And even right now, you're selling your technology as potential solution for your potential customers. But when we're thinking about movies, a great movie, a great novel, a great technical proposal, you really want to do these kind of 5 things. Again, kind of similar to what I just talked about in those other different types of things. We want to identify and understand our audience. We want to determine your goal. We want to discover and understand the challenges. And we want to find the right character that helps us to tell this story. And we want to bring it to a resolution. So let's look at that a little bit more detail. When I talk about those, I am going to kind of steal that kind of technical sales focus, unleashing the power of storytelling focus. Maybe because my background is software sales, it just kind of fits. But I've been doing this for 8 years. It fits when we're talking about how you want to describe and talk with the potential partners, the reviewers of your technical proposal. When we talk about identifying and understanding your audience, that is, who are they? Which program? Which mission? Is this a technical point of contact? Who's reviewing this? How much do you know about who the people that need this, that put this topic forth are? What do they want? Again, a lot of this was described in the technical topic description, right? They outline what they need, the challenges that they're facing, what they want the final product to do, etc. But find out more about that mission, more about what they really are trying to accomplish. Understand what you guys have in common. You've heard us say this probably in previous weeks, certainly other sessions. We talk about domain expertise. Every time you can bring in what you know, it's great. If you were in the Navy and you had the same problem that they're trying to address, but that's not always the case. And that many successful SBIR companies were not also, service members. But what do you have in common? What problems are you trying to address? What are their doubts? This is something that is really, I think, very important, and a lot of people avoid. Try to understand what their misconceptions might be about your approach, about your team, and address every elephant in the room. If there's something that you might believe that they might misconstrue or not believe in you about. Try to address that. What do they know? Because you guys are subject matter experts in what you're doing. So understand that they may not know some really great stuff that you do know. You want to make sure that you're presenting that information to them as well, while considering that they've researched the problem thoroughly. It's in they put forth a topic because they have a specific problem in mind that they want to resolve. And then understanding their culture and their mindset, right? How do they play? What's the game? Who's involved with making decisions? As much as you can know about that is great. And I'll kind of go through the other ones. Determining your goal, for example. This is your goal. I want you to think about what is your goal. And I'm going to suggest what you want them to do is fund your proposal, right? You want to really set the stage for them choosing you as an acquisition partner, or at least connecting you with their primes, whether it's Lockheed Martin or some other, to become a member of the defense industrial base supply chain, right? Discovering the challenges. Again, we've talked about the challenges that are defined and hinted at or laid out in the topic description, right? But also identify those challenges that you have. Do you need additional facilities? Do you need additional team members if you are really going to deliver what you're proposing? So just understand the challenge map there that's going on. And then find the right character. And this is where people are like, what are you talking about, Anne? This is kind of weird. This is woo-woo. And I am, as I mentioned here, I'm not talking about, hi, this is Joe. Joe needs to protect his troops, right? You're not telling the story that way. But I will tell you, you will not go wrong if, even as you're writing, you don't have a character that you spell out in your proposal, but you're kind of thinking of the human that is experiencing first the challenges because they don't have the solution that you have to offer, but then also the benefits when and if your product becomes something that is deployed, that they use. Imagine that too. When you can think about imagining both the problem, the pain points, as well as the vision of the future from a human standpoint, it really does help your storytelling, the way you articulate your proposal much more clear. You're putting in that perspective. I don't know, Dale, did you have any thoughts? I thought I saw a twinkle in your eye about that kind of concept. Go ahead.
No, I would say that the only thing that I would add to what Anna said, particularly when talking about character, the character doesn't necessarily need to be a person. When we think character is a central tenet around which your story is built. And
Right.
when we talk about character building, we're talking about the background. Think of your favorite book. The character, they just plop someone down and said,
Mhm.
oh, it's the hero of the ages. You find out about their background. You find out about their motivations. You find out what's here. It could be actually the way that you set up the problem as the entire thing. That way you set up the outcome and the impact as the central core focus on why someone is engaging with the content that you are creating.
Yeah, sorry, Dale, you were coming in a little bit, but I think we picked it up, right? As Dale just kind of mentioned, you want them to understand why what the purpose is, why you want them to engage with the content that you're creating, about that whole background of that setting. I think that character development is huge. We talk a little bit about that later too. Yeah, I think I did spin this little particular thought in my head was make sure you're keeping that human concept in mind. I think that that is, all of these things are to benefit humans, even if it's an operational improvement. We have an example about a software containerization, right? Legacy software containerization a little bit later on. We'll talk about that. But we're really lives that you're going to save, impact that this will have, the benefits that will have is going to be helpful too, in addition to what Dal was saying. And then I would say bring it to resolution. Spoiler alert, the shark gets blown up in the end, right? When we're talking about SBIR proposals, what we want to talk about is you've created a vision for the reviewers to see what life will be like once they fund you, once you develop this product, and you're addressing the problem that they had. So really kind of keep those, kind of keep that in perspective, because you want to be reminding the reviewers all along why you're doing this certain thing in your technical proposal. Why are you going to do this? Because it helps us to achieve this type of thing. So make sure that you're bringing them along that journey. And then let me go ahead. I'll probably chime in here and there, but Del, let me go ahead and kick it over to you to kind of continue this kind of conversation. I'll watch the chat.
Yeah, and you know what, Anne? Give me like 60
Oh,
seconds. The Wi-Fi is acting weird here again, so I'm going to flip to
oh,
my hotspot. I will be right back.
okay, good. Okay, but then what we'll do is I'll kind of continue on a couple of things, guys, or let me know if you have some other questions here. Or if you haven't seen Jaws, I'm really sorry about that, you guys. That's terrible. You don't get any. When
Yeah,
we're talking,
and I've
yeah,
got a question about
sure.
technical writing, right? As
Yeah,
you two have seen, Sean and I are working on some. So for those of you that aren't aware, my business partner and I uh, have a novel discovery in the quantum algorithm space, and it's pretty amazing. And we have a really difficult time writing technically and then for a layman because there doesn't seem to be any middle ground that we're able to charter. Um,
mhm.
One of the things that I have found helpful is to start with the layman's terms and then get more advanced. But in these things, right, you helped us understand that we need to be as technical as possible because we were talking not to laymen but to industry and field experts. Um,
Yeah,
so for all of the grant writing, and maybe this is just a generalized question, but for different SBIR and NSF grants, should we default to technical when we're writing these?
yeah. That's a great question, Scott. So I'm glad that you brought that up because, and I'll do a little bit of the preface. Have we all heard this? Hey, if you can't explain it to a 5-year-old, you really don't understand it. Yeah, right. But you know what? No, I'm not going to describe a quantum algorithm to my 5-year-old. You're talking to another 40 some whatever, someone else who has some experience in this. These are innovation research, right? They are technical proposals. What we want you to do is a little bit of both, right? We want you to be really specific about why your technology is novel and innovative and groundbreaking, right? Especially when we're talking NSF, but in the other agencies, but DoD as well. Like this is new, novel, requires funding to develop because of this. And then, but we can still talk about that in personal or layman's type of terms. But the layman in this case is someone who has a scientific degree, typically is going to be reviewing it. If it's a technical point of contact at the DoD, they are not going to be experts in quantum algorithms per se, but someone on the team is sort of close to that. They know that they need that area, whether it's cybersecurity based or whatever. So yeah, you do want to address it technically, but then if you're reading, if someone's eyes are glazing over enough, we can talk to you about like, hey, can you explain this a little bit more straightforward in addition to what you just said technically? Del, what do you think on that? And yeah.
Yeah, and so I switched my hotspot. Hopefully this works semi well.
It's good.
Um,
It's good. Yeah.
but I would say kind of to that point, and to just reinforce what Anne was saying. The information on the slide is actually a really great example of that. But when we say the like hesitation on technical writing is a lot of people treat technical writing like a journal article. They're
Yeah.
going to dive super deep into it. And you can have that technical information, but you always want to have that grounding and that kind of ground truth in there. So it's totally fine to have a very technical sentence and then to follow it up with, this means that the innovation works like this, that takes it into an exemplary, explanation that anybody would actually understand from, like I've worked with a company that was doing a hyperspectral snap imaging that did all of these really amazing things. And they explained like why this pixel depth mattered and why this did. And then you know what you follow it up with? This means that we turn, a technology like a black and white photograph into a 4K image. You can see variations, you know what you can pick out, and you can do this. So that's a really great way to actually kind of bridge that gap. If you're able to explain it in a technical way and then explain, and this gets back to one of those core concepts that, Anne started out with and that we're going to continue on through, probably not only this presentation, but every other presentation afterwards, is you have to make them understand and you have to make them care. So, and even, in journal articles, unless you are working in that very specific science, when somebody gives you the technical, you're like, seems pretty cool, but why do I care? And bringing it into the real, giving them a use case, showing them what that actually means to them, that actually bridges that gap between how do I transfer information from a technical to a layman? You don't. Use two examples and make sure that they interconnect.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I think so. That's spot on. Yeah. Yeah, we've seen I love some of our academic clients because they do know how to write technically, right? They're going to articulate. But biggest thing that I see with them, like, okay, so what does that mean? Can you, and I've got a master's in mathematics. I've read lots of things. The point is, it's a little too NIH, NSFE kind of academic-y, science for science sake. This is another element to this is science and research for commercial broader impacts, right? For societal benefit type of thing. So making sure that we're really drawing that to, at the end of this, we have something that's going to help you do this, achieve this type of thing. So yeah, great question.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
that actually,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that gets to, kind of one of the hard points on this slide, and one of those key foundations is a lot of people think that I put science in there and I use a lot of science words so that they understand how important it is, why this is so novel, why it's so groundbreaking.
Mhm.
At the end of the day, if they don't understand what the hell you're trying to say, it doesn't matter. They won't understand the groundbreaking. I have an example here. And again, as I always state, anybody that is this doesn't work science-wise, I ain't a scientist. I'm the business dude. But,
We're making anything up as we go here, guys.
yeah, composite material slats are dipped into a bio-based slurry that has et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is me talking about creating paper, and then most I can throw out as many $5 words as I can to make it sound brilliant. But by the end of that sentence, unless you actually are super hardcore into it, do you know I was talking about making paper?
Not.
Probably not. And so that's why, yes, you have that technical information, but, I would, to, talk to your point, Scott, I would actually follow it up with, this means that we can now produce, information that can be stored for decades because it can be easily transcribed to paper. It's okay, start with the technical and then reinforce in layman or reinforce in non-scientific, reinforce in a grounding that anybody should understand. If it was a new material that actually enabled better adhesion, and because it had a low melt point, it'd be like, hey, here's all the technical stuff. This is why the science is cool. And at the end, it's like, and, the same concept for this is why a grilled cheese works. Because we are adhering to by putting a bonding material between them that can actually be heated to the amount I need without losing structural integrity. Give them something that reinforces the overall science in a way that anybody could understand.
Do you want me to drive Dale just to
Yeah, if you can, because
Yeah, happy to do that.
it is what it is.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Last part, guys, marking proprietary data. We can talk about that like individually when we have things, but don't be afraid to err on the side of giving something that will help describe. If what you're describing is too vague because you want to hold your trade secrets too tight, they're not going to know what your special innovation is. So if you have that concern, we can talk to you about that. Also, that SBIR data rights webinar that I referred you to before, it relates to protecting data, marking data as well. So we can talk to you a little bit more detail. So know that that can be done. You don't want to make your entire proposal every single page cannot be marked proprietary. But if there's a page that you've revealed a little bit of your secret sauce and you don't want that divulged to anybody but the reviewers, you can mark that.
Before we move on to the next slide, and real quick soapbox about proprietary data, because I always get on this when it comes to intellectual property. People go, well, the proprietary information, I'm not going to put it in there because that's how the sausage made. It's not really proprietary information unless I can make that sausage myself based on what you put in there. And I can make that exact sausage. How many types of sausage are there? When it comes down to it, it's a basic process. But unless you're telling me, okay, you do this step, then you do this, then you do this, and I make that exact sausage, not really proprietary. So yes, be definitely aware of, sharing information, marking stuff as proprietary, but be sure it's actually proprietary before you mark it. I've had so many people that are like, this 15-page, technical, our 15-page volume 2 has proprietary information between pages 1 and 15. No, don't. Stop. Don't do that. So make sure that you're actually including proprietary information. It's not that a sausage is made, how your brand of sausage is made and the exact reason why that brand of sausage matters.
And before you move on, there's a question from Cynthia in the chat.
Yeah, I was just looking at that. So Cynthia, great question. I've not seen everything here. So what about the audience? If it's commercial money, I talk to the greed, profit expansion cost. So your audience, when you were talking about here for your technical proposal, are the reviewers, those people who are selecting this right now. That's really what we're talking about, the people who have the problem within the DoD or NASA at the moment. So, and Dylan, if the reviewers are held to confidentiality, why would you need to mark portions of the proposal proprietary? There are other elements to marking this proprietary, especially if awarded becomes part of that kind of data, technical data that can be protected under SBIR data rights. And so that's an element of that you do not want disclosed to other people within the government or other Lockheed Martin contractors or things like that. So there's a reason to mark certain things proprietary if you want to make sure it's not your proposal reviews there's non-disclosure. Get it. Once you're awarded, you want to make sure that you're tracking and keeping track of all of your IP assets. And that includes anything technical data delivered within your SBIR proposals, reports, deliverables.
Thanks, Anna. I was always curious about that. I was like, they're held to come, but it makes sense now with if it's, awarded, that it could be.
Yeah. And a really big factor in there is some kind of how information is going out to reviewers definitely changes between agencies, but there can be some, I don't know, at the end of the day, let's call it consternation, particularly whenever you're going after a patent on what types of information USPTO would consider public disclosure. and how that can change your projected pathway of going from the the I can't think right now today. The kind of first step patent to like the second step patent, from going from a full initial application to a full application, and kind of what that can mean for you. And it gets a little bit funky depending on how information is being transmitted and in what methodologies. So if it is marked as proprietary, there's an entirely separate process that
Yeah.
those things that are marked as proprietary goes through that ensures that, yes, they're confidential, but it ensures strict confidentiality that ensures the guarantee of your rights for the future, of being able to carry that competitive edge / advantage that your intellectual property gives you.
Yeah. And you will see, like, sometimes in the competitions, right? X-Tech competitions, for example, just a quick side note on that one, then we'll keep going. Sometimes they say, no, they do not put anything proprietary in your, it's a proposal, it's a submission to join the X-Tech competition. And they flat out tell you, do not put proprietary stuff here. No, only something that can be available to have publicly shared. So yeah, great questions. So yeah, I just advanced, so yeah.
Thanks, Anne. And, definitely kind of not necessarily the flip side, but kind of expanding on from what we were just talking about, writing technically. So there's a lot of fine lines that you are always going to be walking when it comes to SBIR, STTR proposals, or hell, any type of funding when you break it down to it. And there's going to be some kind of tightropes, and everything that you're doing is a balancing act. It's a balancing act between that technical information that people care about. It's a balancing act between making sure you hit the requirements and actually making that information impactful. Because audience impact is the thing that keeps you from being funded or actually gets you funding. Whether it is SBIR or STTR, whether it is venture capital, angel investment, heck, even SBA loans. It's how do you actually include that information that is that requirement? And this kind of speaks a little bit towards, not last time, I think it was the time before, we talked about the difference between requirements and criteria. So remember, those requirements are the absolutes that you have to put in there, and the criteria are the how you make it compelling, which is what Anne talked about at the very start here. So when you're doing those requirements and actually writing towards those in that technical fashion, you're putting in information that is if you don't if you don't have this, we won't fund you. But then that's kind of second side of this. If you don't understand this, we can't fund you. Not that they won't, but it's just they can't understand how it addresses what they're actually requiring, how it addresses their needs, how it addresses that criteria that they put out there. Another thing that happens, and people give it a bad name, is people think that redundancy is bad. And redundancy is actually bad, but reinforcement is what you're looking for. People often confuse redundancy for reinforcement. They said, I already stated that. But the reinforcement is how you restate it in a different lens so that they get that point that you made before. Just quick example off the top of my head. If it was something if I was making a new type of insulin, when I talked about the problem, I would talk about, hospitalizations, I would talk about care, I would talk about this. And then when I got into like describing what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring back that information about the hospitalizations and this, and I'm going to use that to support a study and say, the first thing for us to really understand about the impact of what we're developing is we're actually going to do a study on this big problem that we said. We said that, type 2 diabetes causes 15% of hospitalizations in America, annually, or whatever it is. I don't even go to the doctor. Don't take medical advice and medical information from me. But I would actually reinforce that throughout. It's not that redundancy, it is pulling it out and restating it in a different way so that they get that undercurrent. Because when it comes to storytelling and it comes to effective, actually technical storytelling, undercurrent is what you're always kind of trying to reinforce, what you're always going back to, and what you are always further explaining. And it's just kind of a good barometer of, hey, what's going to happen here? Why can this actually happen? This is a little bit of a bridge and from last week when we talked about work plan and addressing the 5 W's and the 1 H, the who, what, when, where, why, and how. So the who, why can they do this? Why does that matter? Why do they have the resources to bring this forward? How are they going to utilize them? And that same 5 W's and 1 H concept, you actually want to take through not only your work plan, but each of the sections, each of the areas, each of the, let's call them central points you're making. Like Ann was talking about character, and I kind of said, as one of the characters is the character is really that central point. These things are how you are reinforcing those central points. And that 5 W's and 1 H is the kind of big top hat there, let's call it.
Sorry, guys. Yeah, I just wanted to put it, I was putting a different little view here, so that way I can kind of see the slides that are coming up here. Thanks, guys. That's all I did. So, are we?
Yeah.
Here we go. So next slide.
We're done. Yes. Thank you, Ann.
Mhm.
And so how do you actually do that? Well, one of the big things and kind of a basis for technical storytelling, and I think this really speaks to that question you posited earlier, Scott, is being able to explain technical information in a way that, a layman would understand. And having verifiable data, having information that they can actually understand, kind of validating that information is one of the really good measures of not only, how you cross that bridge, but how you make an effective story and an effective technical story. Technical information is not just science words. It's not just, scientific principles. It's also data. It's numbers, it's percentages. We understand that type of stuff. So anytime you're looking at things like that, you always want to bring in that type of information. That is a really effective utilization of technical storytelling. But it can be hard to figure out, well, what am I putting in here for data? How am I actually validating this information? Particularly if you're working on something that has no direct precedent. If you're making a new version of something, yeah, it's really easy to point towards and say, hey, this is 10%, faster because we take this from 3.2 teraflops to whatever 10% is, plus that. It's been a long day already. But yeah, that's kind of easy. But
Yeah.
even if it's new, and even if it's something super groundbreaking, and again, kind of with that explanatory example, almost model, they have ground truths that they know. They have ground truths that they understand. So what are the related things that have happened? If you have an entirely new firing system for something, and it works in an entirely novel way, you say, I have nothing I can actually, weigh this against. Well, what's your estimation of what it does? What's actually currently accepted? Have they put out there what they would actually like to get? We're going to go through the rest of the bullets, but I want to point out the bottom link here. Particularly if you're working for or trying to work towards a DoD submission, the Armed Services has Senate hearings that happen all the time. And there is a repository. There are hundreds of them that you can actually look through, and their congressional testimonies on issues that were faced, what the actual underlying problem was, what it impacted, what the outcome was, what they wish they would have been able to do, why did it affect them, in a particular area, why it affected their overall ability to do something, starting to bring in data from those other resources, those viewpoints that you might not be able to do. And here we say kind of, it's almost like building that, math proof. You're using established principles to support your novel approach. 1+1 = 2. That's understood and, verified. But now you're saying 1+1 might equal 3 sometimes. Well, in what cases? Why is that way? How can you explain it to me that I understand the areas that it might equal 3 and why that difference might actually matter? Why that difference might be something that I should care about? Along with Senate hearings, we talked about this before, but in almost every single topic you find on something like the SIP, there are references. Those references are a gold mine of information. Being able to utilize and effectively utilize the information that's in those references, the data, the packages, being able to actually use that as an explanation and undercurrent factoid on, we said our thing will probably be better. It would be better in these ways, which have been referenced as a critical need over the next 3 years, particularly when you look at how these, campaigns were effective by, whatever reference they had in there. So how to do that? Really, again, pay attention to those references, look for those relevant technical papers, industry reports, case studies, government and agency reports, and go through there and use that as okay, I need to address this stuff here technically. I need to answer technical questions. What are they really going to understand when I try to make those reinforcement points on why they should fund me, how I would use that funding, and why their funding will equal a difference maker and a key differentiator in their future by using our technology, our innovation, our product slash solution, kind of whatever that is.
And it goes back to, guys, when, that little subsection of what do they know, right? Those references, both NASA, I think NASA does that too, but definitely the DoD topics always have references. And that is a subset of what they have done to understand how to address the problem. So you definitely want to make sure that that's considered when you're coming up with your solution. Okay. Yeah, these go to those couple, Del, we sort of used this example before when we've taught a, different version of this class too. And I thought, instead of kind of pulling even from, I think last week we pulled kind of a newer topic, a brand new topic. This one was just a couple of releases ago. And I was attracted to it. I used to sell C++ software, source code tools for programmers, regardless of financial services, retail, whatever. So we're using C++. So it's object oriented, it's wrappers. We had all these things that we're talking about. This is kind of interesting. So the problem, and we won't go into a bunch of detail again, this is just kind of to give you guys some examples, right? And this particular topic was the military has a bunch of ADA, old programming components, some things that were developed with ADA and other software coding languages. And they still work, they're still good. The effort to try to revamp all of those would be phenomenal, would probably should be done. But in the meantime, they wanted to say, God, is there a way that we can create a wrapper so we can have all of these different types of software programs that were coded in ADA, but wrap them to make sure that they are future-proofed, that we can use them now, that we can make sure that we can upgrade and take care of them, maintain them most appropriately, and they're reliable. And so they created this topic on maybe AI can do this. Maybe AI can create a wrapper, or it's really the term is containerization, right? So you still have your software coded in ADA, but there's this wrapper, there's a container in more current programming, Python, whatever, that will make the military still be able to use that functionality, but in a much more secure way. And so here's some example. Like if we wanted to address that, we'd be looking for those specific searches. We'd be Googling, THAAD. Again, sorry guys, that there was a reference in this topic to THAAD, which is a missile defense programming, right? It was something like that. It was related to controlling missile silos and where the missiles will be coming out and when and how they will be deployed. And so it was very important that they had up-to-date and secure software for that. So find everything that you can learn about that program, the THAAD program. And Dell, actually, you put together the slide, but you could Google, just AI modernization for legacy software. Find information. You can find an article about the Air Force's Business Enterprise Systems Directorate developing through their Department of Air Force bot operations team ways to address this issue with other industry experts. But obviously they still haven't done it yet because they're putting a topic forth. They want people to come up with ideas and bring forth a solution to them. Look at any of those other types of technical approaches to approach this. And then, as Dell mentioned, leverage how important this is. You'll get information by tapping into any of the congressional reports, anything that you can find that can tell you how big of a problem this is for them by looking at the hearings, reading any of those testimonies, etc. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just say that, particularly here, and I think Anne has a example of trying to translate this information into like a start for a section next. But what you're doing here is you're building a foundation of trying to tell what that differentiator is. What is that difference maker? And when we talk about storytelling, the difference maker is really what you are trying to build towards. And kind of to get to one of Anne's, first couple of slides there, if you look at what that structure is, everything really supports that difference maker. Everything that you're actually putting it together, everything you're writing, because they fund difference makers. And for anybody that goes, well, but even think of the things that you've bought in the past. When your oven breaks, do you go out and buy the exact same one that's the exact same number of years old that fits in the exact same thing? Or when you make that purchasing decision, what's that difference maker that kind of tips you? And that's why you're bringing in that information that they're used to, they're accustomed to, they already know, because you're trying to highlight what those key things are that actually does drive that differentiator, makes that difference, and makes them actually care about that difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And guys, this example, it's in the slides, you'll get them. I sit here sheepishly saying, hey, this is AI generated. That introduction, right? That significance, the importance of this problem, the identification and significance of the problem section for a DoD proposal. And there's a similar, I think it's actually called the same thing in NASA proposals. Significance in an NIH proposal. They actually want you to kind of just give us the background. Tell us what you understand. Tell us why this is important to address. Again, in DoD and NASA, they're calling for this, right? They want to have a solution already, but reinforce. And Dell talks a little bit later about kind of mimicking how they talk too, from the topic description and things like that. Pull that in. And that typically is almost a full page, that kind of introductory type of thing, at least a good half a page. So this is too short. And I did AI generate this just to kind of give some examples. And I edited a few things because they actually had a reference that was a completely made up one, but I told AI, this is just made up. And so they made up one. And so I put in an actual real reference at the bottom. And then in the blue is like, hey, they had some kind of lame stuff about the company. And I said, no, I want them to understand why they should trust us, right? What we bring to the table here to explain that. So that just kind of gives you an example, right, of what we're talking about. So again, we're not talking about foo-foo storytelling. We're telling about trying to bring the reviewers along with us just so that they understand that we understand this, we've done our research. I might fill in a little bit more detail, some more data points, some more background story information within this. But that, we're confirming, we get you, we gotcha, we understand this. Let us, now let's segue into how we're gonna approach this. And then, yeah, no, kind of.
And
tell us.
segues are a lot of times where people fail when they actually are trying to write an effective proposal and trying to do that technical storytelling. It's great that you just talked about that, Anne, because this is all about, this next slide here is all about segues. Why do segues matter? Well, segues are we've discussed this before, and even Anne just talked about it, how there are these sections. And people oftentimes treat those sections as standalones. But those sections further develop a finite point that they want. Particularly when we talked about the difference between references and or requirements and criteria, we talked about, hey, these sections are the requirements. The criteria is how you address these sections. But they actually need to flow together into one cohesive. And that's why that establishing that character that Anne talked about earlier is one of the really first things that you want to do when you start to actually try to write your proposal. Because remember, that character is the thing that carries forward. So how are you reinforcing? How are you reinterpreting? How are you putting in additional information? How are you providing context? And being able to have it so that this section flows into this section. From the last example, the identification and significance of the problem of our opportunity goes into the technical objectives. So you say, hey, here's a really big problem. Here's the opportunity we have to address it. And in that next section, it's well, we told you we were going to address it in these ways. Here's how we break down into these different areas on what does this matter? How does this work? And just to kind of go back towards what we were just talking about here on this slide when we talk about these different sections. So how you are putting these together is something like that identification and significance of their problem. So what's the problem? Why is it pervasive? And what the outcomes are if it isn't solved. And then that technical objective is, I told you, this needs to be solved. Here's how we can solve it. And here are the things that we are going to do to actually solve it. And then that next section, statement of work, it's okay, well, we told you the big ticket, but you're probably wondering, well, how are they going to make this sausage? Here's how we're going to make that sausage. Here's the things that we are going to do. And then if you notice, that very next section after that is related work. You told them the things you were going to do. Now you're telling them, hey, by the way, we said that we were going to do this, THAAD containerization, and we needed to, use some COBOL for this. By the way, we've done a lot of crap in COBOL. We've been able to ship these things. We've been able to do this. We've been able to show this. Whatever. COBOL was something I just picked up as an old programming language. But that's kind of how you are building this. It's that character here, you could think of it as the issue that has to be solved. So everything I'm putting around this is this issue has to be solved. Now I'm telling you, I can do this in a way that's going to be effective for you. The reason we can do this in a way that's going to be effective for you is we have this experience. By the way, out of that experience, we have these core team members that actually contributed to that. Here's the other stuff we did. And we said that how we were going to solve this. You know what? Here's actually what that sets up for you in the future. Something like that relationship with future R/R&D. So when we talk that effective story writing and effective technical storytelling, it is really about that. What are those difference makers? How do you highlight those? And how do you write them in a way that, think back to the last book you didn't actually finish. Why didn't you finish it? Did the character fizzle out? Did it jump between place and place? If I started reading a story or started reading a novel about, a 1950s version of Chinatown and a hard-nosed detective PI, and He's chasing somebody down an alley at the end of chapter 1. And the beginning of chapter 2 starts out about the East Indies Dutch company's tea trade, from 1876 to 1924 and the economic impacts on the world. I would be super confused. And you know what? A lot of people, probably accidentally, let's give them, grace here, accidentally do that in their proposals because they take a concept and flip it so hard to try to fit what they think is how you address the criteria, what they think is how you address requirements, that you've lost that central character. So, a lot of stuff when we talk about storytelling, people, you're probably listening and go, it sounds a lot like whenever you write a book. And it kind of is. There's a lot of those book elements that actually come into it.
Yeah. And as Dale said, there's the additional stories and sections, right? The volumes, the commercialization plan, your company and team, etc. Even your facilities help to tell the story about how you can deliver.
So I've got a question before we move on
Yeah,
from
please.
the storytelling. So we've kind of leaned into using Claude and ChatGPT to help us see things that we're not seeing, right? Now it's not good for technical stuff, but it has been very helpful for the storytelling stuff.
Yeah.
And do you recommend we continue to do that, or is that the kind of thing where we might not actually want to lean on it too much?
Okay. Yeah. Dale stepping away to catch a thing. Here's my thought on that. So obviously I'm leveraging some AI here and there.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what we want to catch, right? How vacuous have you noticed AI to be? The content is well-written sentences, but not some meat. I
Right.
think it can be a prompt for, you can give it good prompts, and then it can be a prompt for like, oh yeah, let's kind of bring some more detail in. As long as it's really edited there. And again, I'm not even saying that because, oh, you want it to be your authorship per se, although I think that's part of it. It's just that AI is just vacuous. It's not going to hit everything you need to. But if it can help you, what I tend to do is, hey, I've got this, here's kind of my draft of how I want to discuss my company and team. But as I mentioned before, like that little example that I used before, when I gave it permission to make something up, I didn't really mean that. I just said, hey, this is just for instructional purposes. Don't worry about it. But there were some fake things in there. So be careful about that.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a great answer. I appreciate that. Like
It's happening.
Yeah, well, because sometimes it gives you gold and sometimes it gives you just complete garbage.
Yeah, it's like, oh shit, I didn't think about that. That's a good point. And make sure that it's, it's not just that, oh, that's cool, that's novel and interesting. Oh, let me use that. But yeah, as long as you're assessing, yeah, that's a great point that they included there for sure. I get it. We talked about last week. I have had people, not you guys, who kind of designed a technical proposal with AI. And I'm like, I think you need to get your technical objectives out. If that's not coming from you, I don't think you are competent to submit a proposal to this topic, right? If you don't know what you're going to do. But I do think for some of the other things, it can help you massage your content for sure.
Yeah, and I would kind of back that up with just my feelings on, AI personally aside. AI is a really great brick. AI provides you amazing bricks and amazing mortar, those underlying facts. What AI fails at is intent and intention, and interpretation. So AI is the brick. You're the house builder. How are you going to build that house? So what specifications are you going to build that house? Where are you going to put those things? Like, where's this door going to go? All it did was it provided the materials. Now you need to actually transform those materials into something kind of deliverable. So I think it could be really great to provide some like foundational things, but really treat it as, and we talked about it when we talked about work plans. A lot of people use a bullet list as a work plan. That ain't a work plan. A bullet list is an outline. So use your AI tool like an outline, and then you have to actually build the narrative content yourself. I would say that's probably one of the most effective ways that people can use AI when they're building out proposals.
I want to hit this point. And I'm gonna put the big caveat. Actually, Dell and I have talked about that. I'm gonna be working on something in our very protected DoD Fed ramp focused AI contained system here at TechLink, which is the DoD partnership intermediary where I am based. It is probably the safest type of AI that can be used. Possibly next year doing some compliance checking for technical proposals for proposals, but do not advise you, even if it's your own enterprise thing, they say they don't train on it. I've talked with attorneys, there can be some legal issues with putting technical data into an AI system, and you especially don't want to do it in a general Claude or something like that, right? Where they're training on anything that you put up there. But that's a whole nother thing. I think the technical stuff, you don't put that in there at all. Company and team, facilities, this or that, I think could be helpful. Or something generic to get you some ideas, maybe for your technical, but you do not want to put your technical stuff into AI. Except maybe next year if under a very small pilot. And we can talk to you later about that. If we design this right. Oh, Dylan, I want to just check a couple of things. We found AI to be good for
Yeah.
look at
I
your
just
audience.
think,
Oh yeah,
you know,
yeah.
sometimes we don't have a lot of time or we have small teams and we want
Yeah.
to find a lot of information about, oh, tell me about
Market.
NASA's hypersonic program, right? Like
Yeah.
that can be super helpful, I've found. And, obviously there can be hiccups here and there, but even if it directs you to different resources, I think, that audience piece or maybe that customer piece has been also a helpful use of AI in my experience.
Yeah, great. Dylan, thanks. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad that was a good one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I would definitely back that up, Dylan, that it can be, really great for that. But always, as you said, verify. I've had a lot of those because everything you search on for Google now puts that stupid AI summary paragraph at the top of it. And I've had at least 10% of the time I use it, re-looked at something and went, what is it talking about? That's not right. And
Yeah.
gone to the source, it linked.
Yeah.
So
I had
it
someone the other week tell me they were submitting an SBIR proposal for a specific topic, and I was like, "There's no topic on this." And they're like, "No, Gemini told me it's there." I'm like, "Okay."
um,
That's hilarious. Oh my goodness.
I would say
Yeah.
that to that effect, and to kind of reinforce what we were just talking about, uh, those AI tools like that are the new version of Wikipedia. Why didn't you copy from Wikipedia back in, high school and stuff? Because it was very easy to edit without a correct moderator tool that they were paying attention to. That's what AI is a lot of times now. It gives you a really great start to looking up additional information, but don't treat what it spits out as gospel, because it sure ain't.
Yeah. Yeah. Every time I've done something in AI, something's flat out incorrect. But okay, enough about AI. We love it, we hate it.
Yeah, and
Okay.
a lot of these next slides here are going to be kind of reinforcement points, so we'll probably burn through a
Yeah.
number of them kind of real quickly. But when Anne gave that kind of version at the start and talked about how to write effectively and how to put information together and how to do that kind of storytelling element, another real great version is the hero's journey. People may go, well, I don't know the hero's journey. Yes, you do. Every single piece of mythology or fable we have had for the past 3,000 years has had the hero story. Um, from even before Beowulf onwards, it's really a version of the hero's journey. There's a character and there's a plot, there's conflict, and there's resolution. And people go, well, but that's not technical storytelling. No, but it's the elements of how you tell a story. So the technical aspects of that are, the characters are the business and the intended customers, the entities that exist, those things you can ascribe an attribute to. That's a character, something that has an archetype. That's the character you were writing about. Those are characters that are your tent poles. Plot is what you can do and why it matters. So how are you moving along? How are you giving them that interest that actually keeps them reading, keeps them engaged? That conflict point, problem they face, and what's critical to address. So everything that you would think of as I read this story, it was amazing. Break it down into, those kind of subcategories of, okay, well, what was the thing they told me that I went, oh man, I got to continue to read on? And how did they do that? That methodology of how to do it is something you can probably actually copy for a really effective proposal. It's just changing how information is actually displayed and put before someone and what that absorption and impact rate is going to be at the end, because this is setting the tone for your proposal. They know what they need to focus on, they know what to pay attention to, and things build up over time. We don't, just as human beings, we don't like things that's just like, here's all the information, now figure out why it matters. We want to be something that has actually it tugs at our heartstrings almost, and it's not just a yank at the beginning. It's those gentle tugs until we feel it, until we can actually feel it, and it keeps actually tugging harder and faster and over time, and then eventually it's like, and there we are, and we are satisfied at the end of reading that. And that's what your reviewer should be. They should be satisfied at the end and go, damn, we got to fund this. This is going to change our world.
Yeah. We're kind of jokingly saying, like, you want them to be all giddy and excited and they're just gushing. Maybe not, but there's still going to be the same feeling. They're going to say, yeah, there's that confidence that, okay, this one, we're looking at this one more closely. When they're making a short list, that you want that put out to the side. You want them to say, we believe in this, right? I was as we're talking about this, I think this is an important one. Another aspect of this, there's a data scientist that I follow, and he was talking about a political event that he had gone to, and I will do my best not to go right or left here. But he was talking about what is wrong with the Democrats in terms of their way of doing things. And it just hit me, probably because this session was coming up, but he was talking about storytelling points. He said, Democrats just go to the policy. They just say they want to do this, Medicare for all, whatever it is. And he said, for right or wrong, for truth or lies, what President Trump does, what the Republicans do is they state the problem first, whether that's an actual problem or not, but they state a problem. They state why that's affecting everybody, how that problem is hurting everybody. Then they propose their solution. Then they say what that's supposed to do in the future. Democrats we just go to the policy, Democrats just go to the policy directive. They're not really setting up why it's important that we consider these things. We're in that fuller context. And that really kind of goes back to what we're talking about here, really making sure that we understand, God, there's a problem. It's affecting the characters, these people, your procedures, which I'm going to say still goes back to it affects humans, that by having inefficient policies, et cetera, procedures, et cetera. But then, this is really how doesn't matter whether it's politics, technical proposals, a story, it's how we interpret and how we create change is by these kinds of options. So, yeah, thanks. Just add that.
Yeah, no worries, Ann. And
Yeah.
just a couple, because we've covered most of this information, a couple of just key 3 points to kind of remember is short and direct is your key to success. Short as in, sure, you want to explain things, but you don't want to belabor. Direct is you want to make sure that there's no other way somebody can look at that information, look at what you're presenting them, look at that, fact and interpret it in a different way. Interpretation is the worst enemy that you actually have in proposals, because want to know why? You can't change, or you can't actually decide or know how someone's going to interpret if you leave it up for interpretation. You can't control what the message is. And that is actually where most people lose the story, is they interpret something wrong and it completely takes them out of this is why I care. This is why they're writing towards me. They know me. They want to actually help me. They want to actually do this for me so I can do something better. At the heart of it, kind of, and it's great that you talked so much about sales stuff, at the beginning there, Anne, and equated the story to sales, because really you're making a sales pitch. Your entire proposal is at the heart of it a sales pitch. You're selling them an idea of something that will change their world. Now they have to decide why they want to take that step. So your storytelling is why they actually take that step. So, again, use terms that resonate, tailor the message towards the audience, know who you're writing towards, find out as Anne stated, towards the beginning, you have customers, you have end users. The customer's the one that funds it, but you need to show you understand it from the end user's perspective. The people in the field actually suffering the problem, not the people writing the topic, and they're not the ones that are actually reading it, but the person that is understands their perspective. They've taken that perspective. They've written a topic around solving it from that perspective. So write in that perspective, use that information, and as Anne pointed out earlier, make sure you're using this kind of words that match and the language that actually matches, that verbiage that they pick up on. Don't, and I've actually seen this happen multiple times. Not so much in defense, but I also do a lot of health stuff. It happens all the time in health. Somebody gives a term and it's like, I know what that term is, but the way you're using it, I have no idea what this actually means in this context. And they go, oh, well, here's what it means in the context. How as I, as a reviewer, would ever understand that? So make sure you're making those choices for, okay, when we use this word here, we mean it this way. Could anybody with, whether it's a reasonable or unreasonable assumption, consider it a different way? If they can, change the way we're stating this, change what our impact is, change how we're trying to make this something that somebody's going to read and care about.
If you find yourself knowing in the back of your head, that's a little vague or something, oh, they'll get what I mean. Stop. No, they won't. I'll guarantee it. This morning, I was on a conversation with an NCI, National Cancer Institute program officer, and one of my other clients. And they mentioned, the NCI program officer said, you said in this draft specific aims, which is kind of their summary, blah, blah, blah. I can't even remember what it was. What does that mean? And here's a PhD, managed portfolios at the National Cancer Institute, and she didn't know what he was talking about. He said, oh, I'm so sorry. And here's what it is. So spell everything out, even if you expect that they will know it, that they're going to know exactly what you mean. Spell it out. Make sure that you spell everything. So because back to the main point that we highlighted on this slide is you don't want them to interpret things. They'll fill in the gaps. We're smart people. The intention, what we like to do is fill in gaps. You don't want them to have any gaps to fill in. You want them to, you said what you mean and you mean what you say, and they got it because it came directly from you. Hopefully that makes sense. These are a couple of things that Della, you would kind of put those in. I wanted to.
Yeah. And just, particularly we keep talking about engagement, and that's because as we've stated before, and as Dan has stated multiple times, is kind of keep that human in the loop and human fact. You have to make these things something that are easily digestible, easily readable. Our next section actually dives really well into that. But it is use those things that are going to actually keep them engaged. Think about it from a reading perspective. If you were reading this, what would actually keep you engaged and keep you to continue reading? Because a lot of times these are 10, 15, 25, heck, even if it's something like a direct to phase 2, up to 45 pages of a lot of times dense information. And if people just crowd everything in there, so, you have to have these elements that actually keep them focused, because focus is what you want them to maintain. You don't want their mind to wander. So, pose questions,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
happens? Give those facts on irony, tell us something is wrong. School kills creativity. You go, but school actually fosters it. Well, no, because it does this. So have that. That's like, okay, well, here's something that would interest somebody else if they read it.
Right.
And
go ahead.
I was just going to say, and here's a really great grounding example or grounding exercise people can use. It's a really great way to get your start to, doesn't matter really if it's your proposal, it's a start for putting together a business plan, putting together your business model strategy. A lot of the elements that you actually do for a business can start off with a 2-sentence exercise. What you're doing, why it matters, and why people would be interested are the 3 elements. And actually getting it down to 2 sentences is something a lot of people struggle with, but it gets you to the be direct and be as short as possible. And had an example here of taking that same core idea of the software containerization and how you would write this out in a 2-sentence structure. Because these 2 sentences, those 3 core elements, actually are the 3 core elements to any winning proposal. Why what you're doing is different, who cares, why they care. You have your problem, you have the innovation, you have the customer, and you have the value proposition. And everything else that you're putting together across those other 8 sections or however many sections in your proposal package are, again, just reinforcing those points. So this gets you a start on, now I have the core, what I need to write. Now I'm actually going to continue to build on it and transpose information, know that I need to reinforce this point somewhere else because this is a core concept. This gives you that almost central pillar that we keep talking about to actually write effectively a complete, compelling, and compliant proposal package around.
Yeah. And this is that kind of the classic, like Steve, like, we help X type of company, achieve Y type of benefit through Z, what we do type of thing. There's lots of different value propositions, but this in the context of an SBIR proposal for sure, it's really helpful, right? This training yourself to articulate what you're doing in very succinct ways is really very good. And this is kind of, we've talked about this already, Dell, a little bit too. So, and again, I'm looking at the time. I want to make sure that we can kind of finish up some of the other elements here in the next 10 minutes here. That, mimicking, repeating, kind of making sure that you're using their language, that actually in general is a good sales or a good communication strategy, is to mimic your audience as much as possible if you're trying to talk with people. So make sure that you're bringing in how they talk about their problems into the way you write your proposal. And Dell in here has a great example from a different type, another one that we were looking at, this context-aware decision support system, in terms of how they worded things and how he's rephrasing that within his narrative. So I'll let you kind of go ahead and do this. If you don't mind, Dell, if you want to, there's something else you want to mention on that, but I wanted to make sure that we're
The only thing that I would say is, just reinforces the point we just talked about using their own words, using the words they understand and using those words effectively. So again, as Anne mentioned, you'll look at the slides, read through it. This is not a, hey, copy this, but this is a, use this as a foundation.
Yeah. Just to, get your wheels going in your own heads, right? Did I miss one? No. Yeah. These are, again, we've kind of said this almost every single session. We've hit on at least one of these in terms of mistakes in proposals. And again, when we're talking about narratives, if your objectives are unclear, your narrative is not going to really be all that clear either, right? So be as specific and as clear as possible. Make sure, sometimes jargon is very appropriate for your industry, for the technology. Spell it out, explain it. Don't assume that they know what AML stands for, when amyloid myeloma leukemia or something like that, right? Make sure that they understand that everything that you put in there is spelled out, at least the first instance, and that you're using as much natural language as possible. And then we're going to talk about formatting here in a little bit. And again, everything that you want to do. This really kind of reiterates everybody about what we kind of, it summarizes what we've talked about. So the next, I want to give you an explanation on this title slide. We're going to talk about formatting and white space in the next 8 minutes here, just to kind of wrap up the story here. This is an example from NIH, not from DoD, not from NASA, because I don't have access to any of those. But right now, you can see how dense proposals can be, right? You want to put as much content into those 10 pages, for example, if that's your limit. But it's going to be really helpful that you have some white space, that you have some imagery in there. It will also, it's not just images for image purposes like I have in the slides. It is images to help tell the story in a more complete way, especially because you only have 10 pages, for example. It will give you some information to refer to in your narrative that they can give you some more information about. But here's some tips for formatting with visuals and white space. That well formatted, that's the other element, that's a visual element to the reviewer. Boy, this is an attractive thing. It's not busy. It's not, I've had an example. Examples are sometimes people want to cram so much in that they squish all the word spaces, the letter spaces, or, I don't know what they are. They're just so tight. The lines are really tight, all of the stuff, and I can't even read it either. Well, always keep in mind the agency's formatting. They're going to have points. They're going to say no more than 6 lines per inch or something like that. Keep everything normal, guys. You really can tell your story having a normal size font, single spaced, 1-inch margins, appropriate things. So, but agencies always define what they allow for your formatting. So keep those in mind. And we recommend for all of the agencies, but for DoD and NASA, they have their defined headings, but go ahead and put some subheadings in there to help. So keep their headings, but then you can help them tell the story by, directing their attention to certain things by making sure that you have some subheadings that may be helpful there. Make sure that you use tables and lists where, gosh, a table is going to give you a great way to demonstrate competitive solutions, for example, instead of having a bunch of context. But sometimes that can take up more space. So keep that in mind, but that helps to add another visual element and also give you just a very quick shot. For example, DoD, we already know, they actually even provide you with a little table about what they want their statement of work to kind of look like, the summary of the statement of work, right? Because they wanted to have a quick reference to it. But make sure that you have spacing between paragraphs. Add some white space as appropriate around images and things like that. Incorporate figures, charts as relevant, because those will really help tell the story a little bit better and also maybe answer more completely than what you could actually explain in a paragraph. We also encourage people to bold or italicize. Don't use different colors necessarily, but if you have a comment or a statement within your narrative, it's like, man, this is it. This is our central hypothesis, for example. Go ahead and bold it. Call it out. You want to be able to draw the reviewer's attention to things you want them to especially pay attention to. And make sure that every time you put an image or a table in there, that it contains the caption and that you're actually telling the reviewer what that's all about within the narrative. Don't just kind of put it in there on its own. Make sure you're referencing it's part of the story. You want to take this one? This one, you just got it.
I think that this one is just gets back towards those trying to make the white space matter. The one thing I would say from the previous slide, if we can actually probably skip this slide and the next one, because these are really just ground truths information, not something we need to super dive into, but just remember that You're trying to make it as easy to read as possible, but it is easy to read as possible that they gain key understandings. So like when Anne was talking about all those different things that you could use formatting wise, you're just trying to figure out the best way to make a key understanding point stand out from the rest of everything else.
Yeah,
And you may be going, well, it's key for them to understand everything. No, it ain't. Just like proprietary information,
yeah,
unless it is something that is super critical for them to get how that sausage is made and what that sausage is, it's fine for it to just be text. But anything that is that, this right here, this is the difference maker. You want to use those formatting principles and those formatting kind of techniques so that you make them stand out for the rest so they get those engagement points. This is the way you keep stuff from being misinterpreted. This is the way that you leave yourself in space so that you can make those, like we talked about earlier, the differentiation between having the technical fact and then following it up with something that is a ground truth that everybody can understand and they get it.
yeah,
If you go, well, Dell and Ann, I wrote my proposal. I don't have enough space to explain these technical things. You did something wrong. You should have enough space to explain them.
yeah.
So, and
Oh,
this
okay.
kind of feeds into, yeah, the next one's here about just imagery.
Yeah,
People oftentimes make the mistake of, in a 10 pager, I need to get as much text as I can in there. You know, there's an old adage, and it is a very, very right one that says a picture speaks 1,000 words. 1,000 words is 2 pages of text. There's a lot of pictures in there that you can actually use to get someone to figure it out. Things
mhm,
like control schemes, schematics, drawings. You go, I just wrote this paragraph about how this thing works and how we're going to make something different. How do I make sure somebody actually gets the right picture in their head when they read it, that they can't interpret it wrong? Give them the stupid picture. Make the picture for them. So things like pictures, graphs, tables, images, dynamic visual elements, because humans are visual people. Visual people. Humans are visual creatures. We all are. We have been since we threw pointy sticks at mammoths, thousands upon thousands of years ago. So we understand that image, but then, as Ann said, explain what they should pick up from that
That's
image.
that's really the key thing in this, you guys, I know, and I, sorry, I feel like I'm rushing here, but I am gonna rush because I want to make sure that we're kind of keeping some time and get that stuff, but make sure that you're pointing out, tell them in the narrative what you want them to see. In figure 6, you will see this is our Gantt chart for how it will achieve this. Here's our preliminary research. This is what we did with these mice, for example. And so show them those types of things. I'm gonna go ahead and skip these types. Yeah, as in figure 2, you'll see this, for example. And Dell, I love these things that you've added here in terms of imagery, what we want to talk about.
Yeah, and I
Images.
think this particularly talks to what you were just saying, Anne, about, labeling them, and saying, yeah, I gave you this image, but here's what you should actually pay attention to in this image. Here's what that key thing is from this image. It's a really great thing. Everybody knows these images. They're from Tiananmen Square. And the picture on the left, they're actually kind of the same image. One zoomed in, one isn't. So what does this actually matter? Like, what is the difference maker between the story that these two images tell? Like, why is one more important? So kind of being able to choose the right image and know how it should impact the audience and know what you want them to gain and take away from that. And if you want to flip to the next slide, Anne, this
Yep.
just as a further on. And the reason that you'd be very careful with this is you don't want those illusions that somebody like that previous one, when you have the difference between well, this tells one story, this tells the other. Well, which image are you using? Why? Which story do you want to get across? Those things that can be interpreted multiple ways,
Yeah,
just like we talked about in text. Don't do that in imagery. Will
yeah,
kill your proposal.
yeah. And I'm going to give you, I mean, this is another kind of types, right? And let me go to a visual of what this says, right? Comparison charts, functional diagrams, diagrams of what your solution will look like. If you have preliminary studies, you can put in, for example, on that one, hey, we've actually done some bench work on this. This is what it looks like on the bench, and what we're planning to do for the production version. If you have that, go ahead and include that. Here's, these are examples that you can use for that type of situation. So, and again, I don't want to rush. I'm not trying to rush through that too much, but really just want to kind of get the point there that those images can really be helpful. And then positioning them within your story is really going to add to both how you describe your proposal, how you convince them that you've got something there, and why they should have some. We will not review what we just talked about because we've done it. But next week, what should they do? What should they get ready?
So I was going to say next week, we're really going to talk about, customers and pivots. So being able to identify, because we talked about this in the second week,
Yeah.
that, someone like DoD or NASA are your first customer. They're not
Mhm.
your only customer. And to be blunt, they're probably not even going to be your biggest customer. So how do you look and start to think about those? What is this other opportunity I need to kind of take this towards? How do I pivot it? But a couple of things that we want people to maybe, do almost as homework is we just talked about the importance of imagery. And, just to give a little bit of a foil to one of the things Anne said, I would say that imagery is a make or break for your proposal. Effective imagery can either sink your proposal or can, make it a shining star. So what are like two images you think that you come up with that would get someone to understand? Two really great examples would be how the thing works. So something that shows that just mechanics of it, so someone can get it. And, something on what can that benefit be? Like, what is it now versus what could it be? And at the end of the day, why is somebody going to give a damn enough to give you maybe $250,000, $500,000, whatever for a phase one? So
Yeah.
that's
Really
one thing. And then start to outline that story with if I looked at it from a perspective of, here's the central tent pole, what would I include as, accompanying information for reinforcements? Start to think of outlines that way and see if it gets easier to write a proposal and see if it gets better to write a proposal. So maybe create an outline from that perspective instead of, okay, in this very specific section, I need to cover these things. Sure. But it's a very specific section. You want to start to tell the information about this, start to convey this in an impactful manner. Just come up with a working outline based off of, general DoD instructions.
Great. Hey, thanks, Del.
Thanks,
Everyone,
Ann.
thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to kind of shoot us an email and we'll follow up. And I will go ahead and send off these slides here just in a few minutes here, and the recording will be up next week.